Satnam. Happy new moon. It's the new moon. It's the new moon. It's the new moon in Cancer. So the moon finds itself in its home territory. And that space is where, well, it's where the moon is home. The moon is the ruler of the home, and all of the energies that are typified in the home environment. So family and comfort and safety and security. It's the confidence in our human form that we're given by our mother. And so the moon rules that. The moon rules all of the unconscious movements of the human that are instantiated in us within that period of time where the mother is undoubtedly the primary caregiver. It's the infancy. Before we formulate a conscious memory of things, we are imbued with all of these things that operate underneath our conscious behavior. We're developing parts of the brain that are older than the memory function. So there you have it. That's the moon. It rules this kind of unconscious place. And the moon being in the sign of Cancer brings that into our kind of internal, brings it into an internal focus. Whether we're doing so consciously or not, we're operating more potently within that unconscious space, which is interesting in the contrast of the sun being in Cancer and that being a place of ultimate light and warmth during the summer months within the northern hemisphere. Either way, the contrast always has to be there. The polarity is struck. We have the full unconscious and then the conscious awareness moving through the realm of the unconscious during the summer month, the first month of summer, the cardinal energy of the summer experience. But let's leave summer out of it. The moon, in its rulership of our unconscious space, sidebar. If you have any questions, put it in the chat. I got it up here on the screen. So the moon in this new phase, during the new moon in Cancer, which happens today at precisely 3:58 Pacific time, so in roughly 3.5 hours, the moon shifts into this new lunar phase. Previously, we were in the Gemini lunar phase, and we were still wrapping that up currently. We're still wrapping that up now. So as we move into the Cancerian lunar phase after 3:58 Pacific time, that puts us into a brand new space. It puts us into a brand new concept of building and being and creating and becoming. The new moon in Cancer is very potent for things that you want to birth into the world. So it's good in that archetypal creative sense, but it's more than just to create and to let go of. It's the things that you want to create that have a kind of lasting value. And this is where Cancer and Capricorn share their polarity, is the concept of lasting value, of lasting, of longevity. The Cancerian imprint is not just to create and release. The Cancerian imprint is to create something so archetypally potent that it lasts onward, outward into, presumably eternity. In our minds, we're like, continue the bloodline. We have to continue the bloodline, and they will continue the bloodline, and so on and so forth, and such and such. The continuation of the family is the pure archetype of Cancer. And so we get all of the things that are contained within that object of direction. The notion of caring for and nurturing things. It's the careful attention that it takes to develop a child from infancy until adulthood, and to let them free at that point, and they can continue on with their own doings. The attention that it takes is the most important part. So when we're creating something in the Cancerian sense, we're not just creating it, again, not just creating it to have it be and let it go. You're creating it with the idea that it will carry on, and to have that carry on, it has to be given the utmost care and attention and nurturance. So when setting your intentions for this Cancer new moon, give yourself enough space to think about the kinds of care that you need to give to this new thing, whether it's a new idea, project, family member, concept within the family structure, anything that you decide to put into your intentions. Ensure that you take enough care to give thought to the nurturance that the new thing will require. It's like, think about it in the context of, over the next month, I can do this to nurture this new thing. Over the next 6 months, between this Cancer new moon and the Cancer full moon 6 months from now during Capricorn season, I will be able to give this kind of care and attention to this thing. Over the next year, between this new moon in Cancer and the next new moon in Cancer, I will give it this attention. Think about it in terms of longevity. Think about it in terms of the overarching cycles that continually lap with one another, and see what you can put into it. See what kind of intention, see what kind of real Cancerian intention you can put into it. And at the same time, the shadow of the Cancerian archetype is to smother. It's like, I will give this utmost care constantly and consistently, and in that process, I never have to let it go. It never has to interact with or be affected by the outside world, because it is mine and I can keep it in its pure and infantile form and care for it in that way. And that's especially important with children, because it does require a kind of care in the infantile stage of, I care for, and therefore I shall give whatever is needed in this exact moment to allow them to build. But then at some point you have to allow more space for its own autonomy. And so that applies to projects as well. Maybe not on such a long term, but maybe you're thinking about something that you're going to nurture to maturity over the next 25 years. Or maybe you're thinking about something that you want to nurture to maturity over the next month. Either way, think about it in terms of, how can I care for this to give it the utmost longevity, and appropriately apply that intention. Apply the intention. It's not just the, come on now, button. It's not just the the need for care. It's the need to care for intentionally moving forward. So that's the Cancer new moon. There's so much more happening involving that. The Cancer new moon is happening at nearly the center of the Cancer, what's the word I'm looking for here? Season, mansion. Mansion is the one I was looking for. Season also works. The new moon happens nearly at the center, so we've got 2 months of Cancer, 2 weeks of the Cancer season before we hit the second. That's actually important. I'm going to touch on that in a minute. The second Capricorn new moon before the sun moves into Leo. But then we also have the 2 weeks of Leo season, where we're still in the Cancer lunar cycle. We might come back to that. Anyhow, the next 2 weeks, we're still in this Cancer archetype of the sun moving through the sign of Cancer and keeping us in the conscious awareness of this this need for care and nurturance, the need for connection on a very deep and animal level, the need to feel connected to and a part of a kind of family. So seek the things, or not seek necessarily, recognize the things that give you that feeling and feed into that, so long as they're not, destructive or whatever. Feed into that thing that gives you that feeling and allow for that to be a part of your everyday thought process, your everyday feeling process. The new moon is connected to... we're going to go with, all right, so most appropriately, not necessarily the strongest connection, but it's most appropriate with Venus. So Venus is also in Cancer. So we add to this Cancer new moon nurturance an element of the relational. We're not just thinking about these things in terms of, what am I doing to nurture this new thing? It's like, what kinds of relationships are formed around me, exist around me, or can be formulated and nurtured within my sphere of influence that will help this new thing come into being. It's the village that raises the child. It's the community that supports in your creative endeavor. These things are very important at the moment. So Venus is entirely different things. Venus and Saturn are connected in this, and that kind of ties it into the new moon. But Venus is a ways away. It's not outside of the orb of influence, but it's far enough away that it's kind of, in terms of its closeness, it's considered a secondary thought. But it's important because it's in the sign of Cancer. It's necessarily connected. Closer to this is the connection with the nodes of the moon, also potently brought into this because the nodes of the moon are connected to the moon. They're currently in Libra and Aries. They're polarity points. The south node being in Libra, the north node being in Aries. So we're moving away from a place of overindulgence of the outside connections and toward a new recognition of the self and how that plays into the relationships. The Libra-Aries dynamic is the balance between, is the polarity between other and self. When we overindulge the other, we forsake the self. We reduce what the self is what it's worth. Whatever the self is worth, it becomes less or perceived as less when we overindulge the needs of other. So when you're thinking about how that plays into nurturing something new in a communal sense or in a relational sense, you have this thing, and that thing is your responsibility, your desire, your love, your heart can pour into this thing, and that will help it grow. That will nurture it. That will bring it into being. And the other relationships outside of that can be, I'm going to say it this way because it's kind of appropriate, can be taken advantage of to help to nurture this thing. You can reach out to these exterior relationships to gain access to greater resources that would help nurture this thing. And it's ultimately in the context of, like, these people can help this come into being. And the idea is these people will benefit by this coming into being, not how can I benefit these people so that this is something that they would consider doing. So think about it more in, give it a more Aries sense. It's like, this is something that I'm trying to do. This is what I need for it. Ultimately, whatever you create benefits outwardly, regardless. So you're not thinking about it in terms of how will I benefit them by having them participate in this. Think about, how can this be its greatest self, the greatest iteration of whatever it is, whatever your new thing is. How can I approach my relationships to create this greatest version of this thing? And that ripples outward. So you're thinking self in nurturing this in new thing, whatever it is, new object or subject or person or thought, and how will that in its greatest form radiate out to help other people? And to understand that it will help other people is to understand that other people will contribute to it. A priori, like that's just the fact of it. Human beings are social creatures. They understand that what they give benefits them, and it's very like deeply ingrained in most people. Like literally 97% of people understand that. There's a lot of like contractual and transactional programming in people, but ultimately, like if you have the right people around you, they just understand that contributing to this new valuable thing that you're trying to bring into being is a benefit to them and the greater whole. They're not just thinking about them. If they're thinking properly, they're thinking that what they contribute to benefits the whole, and what benefits the whole benefits them, and what benefits them also benefits the whole. And it's just this whole lovely thing, it's literally the way that the family becomes such a powerful force. It's the constant interbeneficiary cycle. And it radiates outward beyond just the family, the like nuclear unit of human flourishing. So we have the nodes of the moon interacting in this. So let me wrap that up a little tighter. Give whatever you are trying to bring into being the right care, the right attention, and understand that the resources around you can benefit this thing. And to make it its greatest self benefits everyone else. That is where that Libra-Aries square, it's a challenging aspect between these nodes of the moon, but it ultimately becomes something that's very unified in how it affects the core principle. As long as you're focused on benefiting this new thing, you're allowing for this challenging aspect to be at its most beneficial. And so we have that. Not as tightly tied. We have a harmonious aspect between the sun and moon in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces. So we have Saturn in Pisces calling on us to gain greater discipline and direction and structure around the things that are spiritually rewarding and relevant to us. And also kind of, well, this is also appropriate. The Pisces rules music. And this is important, not because music itself is an isolated thing that is important, but because music is an analog of human experience. It's a human existence. The way that harmonies and melodies come together and instrumentals feed into and rhythm creates structure for the music itself is an analog of human existence. It's an analog of everything being connected and operating in a harmonious and rhythmic sense. So when we think about Saturn in Pisces, we're developing new, lasting, stable structures that that operate on the archetypal level, not the human three-dimensional level, but the archetypal, like, cosmic level, to create the greatest harmony between things, to create the greatest connectivity between things. It's the unification of all things. That's Pisces, and Saturn is the structure that makes that possible. So we have that unification. The harmony between this new moon and the Saturn in Pisces is understanding the discipline, and, well, Saturn is kind of the contrast to Cancer. Saturn rules Capricorn. It's the contrast to the moon, for sure. Saturn rules Capricorn, the moon rules Cancer. And like I said toward the beginning, the polarity shared between those two is the polarity of, the element shared between those two is the element of longevity. Both seek longevity. One cares and nurtures for, the other provides and gains resources for and pushes to grow. So the structure necessary to create something, that is Saturn, and it's in Pisces, and it's harmonizing with the moon and the sun. So we get a lovely kind of structure within that harmony that helps whatever it is you wish to bring into the world to be more stable on a deeper level. It's the primary level of the universe, Pisces. It's the chaos that comes before the structure is given to it to create the world. That is there, and the way that Saturn, I said this earlier, brings Venus into the mix is by, well, without getting too technical, the sun and moon and its interaction with Saturn is a fair bit. It's a wide aspect. It's 5 degrees off of perfect, which usually we go with like 3, but it's the sun and moon, so they add a bit of power. So 5 degrees is reasonable. I'm getting technical. I tried not to. It's inevitable. So Saturn is a bit astray from a perfect aspect, far enough that it loses some of its potency. And then that Saturn is a ways away from perfect with Venus in Cancer. So the spread between Venus and the sun and moon in Cancer it's a bit wide to consider a strong thing. But when you add in the relatively medium effect of Saturn connected through Cancer, it's a bit weird. It's like a 3-point turn, getting from the one to the other. Anyhow, Saturn ties it all together, gives it structure, if you will, gives it an operable container to move within. What time we got? We have that time. All right. So that's that. These are the things directly influencing the moon in Cancer and the sun in Cancer. And the new moon phase, again, kicks off 3:58 Pacific time. So wait until after that to give yourself some intentional production to make your intentions, write your intentions, write with your hand and ink and paper, write your intentions down, or draw them, or something that is literal. Like, typing is fine, but it's better if you can put it from hand to tool to paper, and there's a kind of magic to it that's different than the digital. So we have another thing in this new moon phase that's not directly connected to the new moon, but it locks in a certain energy for the duration of this new moon, this lunar phase. And I didn't wear my glasses and I drew too small, so I'm going to have to look a little closer. All right, so we have, this is actually kind of fun. Mars in a kind of energized harmony with Saturn, which gives us, well, it's a moment where Mars is energetically connected to Saturn. It's called a sextile. It's a 60-degree separation. And that 60-degree separation is a kind of energetic harmony. There's a buzz about it, but it doesn't automatically do things. You can decide to act on it. When we're talking about Mars and Saturn in a harmonious sense, neither of them being in a particularly comfortable place, because Saturn in a kind of amorphous water sign isn't particularly comfortable. Mars in Taurus is like, there's lots that can be done, but like you can only move so fast, and Mars wants to go faster. So we have Mars in Taurus, and it's in this energetic connection with Saturn in Pisces. So we're observing the transformation that has occurred over the last few months. This is actually something that kind of played its hand during the last eclipse a few months ago on April 8th. And so the two, Mars and Saturn, had just come together, or were about to come together. So they were at the very last bit of the cycle before Mars met with Saturn in Pisces. Now we're 60 degrees ahead of that, and Mars has just passed that 60-degree mark. And this opening sextile, as it's called, is a kind of rear view mirror. You can look at the movements that have happened over the last few months and see it's like what has developed. And because this is part of the eclipse that happened, it's definitely important for the lunar cycles throughout this 6 months between eclipses. So we have Mars in a sextile with Saturn, action and restriction. It's like it's the gas and the brake working together. With any luck, they're actually working together in a productive fashion. Mars and Saturn are very productive planets. One moves very quickly, tries to get things moving as quickly as possible, and Saturn sets the pace. And without that pace, you burn out, or you forget, or you move on to different things, or you get distracted, or you get angry, or an emotion gets in the way somewhere. And Saturn is that thing that kind of pulls it all together and says, no, fucking calm down. Do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then do this, and just keep doing that until the initial trajectory is actually reached and the goal is accomplished. So we have this, we had this Mars and Saturn conjunction in Pisces 3 months ago, setting that frequency within the eclipse, and the cycle of action and accomplishment within the spiritual context, within the archetypal context of Pisces. And it's a cycle of loss, because Pisces is that which rules the kinds of experiences that we have connected to loss. But it's a loss of all things. It's a loss of well, I mean, classically, it's a loss of people connected to us, or life, or money, or materials, but it's not always that. It's almost never that. It's like, obviously, we're not constantly losing a loved one. We're also losing elements of our past, of our ego, of our childish whims and wishes, and allowing us to mature toward greater things. We lose the negative marks on our soul left by traumatic experiences. And that is the same kind of loss. And in terms of Pisces, in terms of the archetypal realm, it's the same as the loss of another person in our life. As far as our soul is concerned, to lose a shred of our previously established, comfortable and knowable previous experience, it's It's the same thing. It's the same thing. You're losing something, and the soul feels that, but it becomes lighter in the process of losing, and new things are able to come into being. Everything must sink back into the primordial chaos before it can be born anew in Aries. So anyway, Mars connected to Saturn in an energetic fashion. We're looking back at the kinds of things, the cycle that kicked off just after the eclipse. And we're thinking about what have we lost? What have we lost in both positive and negative senses? Remove the positive and negative sense and think about, what cycle of loss was kicked off, and how has your life changed? How has your experience changed? How has your manner of thought and being changed? How has your spiritual path changed over the last few months? And so we look back at that and we decide now, with Mars in this connection to Saturn during this new moon in Cancer. I forgot how I was phrasing that, but I'm going to finish it with we apply that in such that we can now set a kind of we can recommit. There we go. We can recommit. We can renew our commitment to whatever that forward momentum was. We can understand that there is, it's like refueling the car. You put more gas in the car because you were running out of gas. You pulled off, you got to the gas station, you look at how many miles you've gone, and you look at the road ahead, you fill the gas tank again, and you get going. That's just that. So that's the Mars and Saturn connection and how it plays into this. Quick recap. Something you wish to nurture. Put that into active intention setting after the new moon at 3:58 p.m. Pacific time. And with that, understand that the nurtured thing can greatly benefit through the relationships around you, so long as you do not prioritize those relationships over the nurtured thing, and understand that those relationships will naturally feed the nurtured thing. And if that thing, because that thing is directly connected to the path that was already set 3 months ago when Mars and Saturn met with one another, let this new committal moment, the Cancerian committal moment to something that has longevity, be a reason to, put some more gas in the tank and get the fuck down the road, get going. Make it happen. Make it work. Give this thing life, whatever it is. And that's that. That's our new moon in Cancer. Happy new moon, everybody. Satnam. Have a lovely, lovely rest of your day, and enjoy Venus Day today, and enjoy the Cancer new moon and the Cancer lunar cycle. The next astro update will be, well, I do it kind of every Monday, but small bits. The full moon, which happens at 29 degrees of Capricorn. Later, 29 degrees of Cancer Capricorn polarity. I'll be back tonight at 5:30 for meditation and gong to set this frequency in, and then Guru Jas will be joining us on this stage at 7 p.m. Pacific time. I'm trying to remember. Hold on. I don't have that window up. Somebody out there knows what's going on at Rama, New York. I do not at the moment. I forget by the end of these things. It's incredible. Anyhow, set new intentions. Be good to whatever it is, and enjoy your forward momentum and the things that come to pass as a result, and the people that come to your path as a result. Satnam.
الناس في